Welcome back to the Wings Conference 2016 here in beautiful Seattle, Washington. And today we're here with a very special couple, Tom Goldsmith. Now, Tom and I, you've known each other for a little while now, and we've known a little bit about the Guardianship. And I'm just actually finally getting to meet with you. And you are Tina Baldwin, and you are a disability rights advocate versus where Tom is more of a senior advocate, correct?
Correct.
Tina, let's talk about your committee first and tell us what your committee is about.
Well, I'm on a subcommittee that's looking at a representation for people under guardianship or entering guardianship. And this is a subcommittee of the Long Range Planning Committee. And so we have looked at and discussed various options and approaches to that issue of representation for people. And as you mentioned, I'm interested in people with disabilities, but in fact I think many of the things that I advocate for are relevant to elders, people with traumatic brain injuries, or any of the other needs that might bring them into the discussion of needing guardianship services.
I'm on a subcommittee also in the long-term planning full committee, looking at the possibility of setting up a helpline function, addressing the question of all of the people in the community who need to know more about guardianship realities and situations, and sometimes on short notice. I think both of us, from our point of view, tend to look at the what I call the consumer side of the guardianship world, which is, I think traditionally has been a fairly underrepresented part of the whole guardianship set of issues. So we've started in on looking at, we studied pretty carefully a helpline that's being set up, that's been set up for 3 decades in the state of Wisconsin, which in some ways, by the way, is a state fairly similar to Washington in size, with a big agrarian component and also some large urban centers. But we're also finding that there's a number of starts at helpline functions in Washington state, which people don't seem to know very much about for some reason. We were surprised by that in our subcommittee.
Speaking of educating people in Washington about what's going on, what is it that you think or you want to have people come away with tomorrow in our conference?
I think one of the things that has impressed me about the whole WINGS process is that it is a working interdisciplinary network of people coming together to talk about issues related to guardianship, and they have unique perspectives. I think we have had a year in getting to know one another, working and learning about those issues. My goal, my hope is that after tomorrow, we will even have a better idea of what we need to do, and that these committees' relationships and this networking will be stronger and more committed to working on addressing guardianship, improving guardianship.
Every state in the U.S. and probably most countries in the world are seeing these problems come to the fore, both for disabled persons and for aging persons. The aging community is obviously growing. The number of us, one person put it pretty well, I thought, that the medical world has done quite a wonderful job at increasing people's length of life. They haven't done as well in terms of helping people be prepared for making the decisions and planning that come at the end of life. So, and every state is very much involved in getting more and more professionalism introduced into supporting these people, and then the support itself comes from always in the beginning from family members and community and good friends. But when that support runs out, more and more formal support is needed in terms of formal guardianship, sometimes even paid professional guardians. And it turns out there's a lot of stakeholders involved in making that work well. And I'm hoping that out of this meeting tomorrow, more and more stakeholders will be speaking with each other, explaining their positions, taking positions, learning more and more about what has to happen in the coming decades to make supported decision-making. Let me say that differently. Make decision-making for our elders and our disabled persons work more smoothly for more people.
There are some people that feel that supported decision-making means an abolishment or an abolishment of guardianship. And that is not my worldview or my opinion. I think there's a valid place for guardianship. And so we need to discuss how to make it safe alternatives. The legislative and judicial bodies are used to investigating issues. And I think when we're talking about supported decision-making, we need to be looking at and studying that in terms of the whole picture. And when is it appropriate how do we find out if it's appropriate for a person being guardianship? How do we set up the mechanisms to make sure that the person is represented in that process, and that they truly have an advocate for them? These are problems that are valid and perfectly suited for the WINGS format. As you mentioned, I'm interested in disability issues. And so within the context of WINGS, and one of my goals is to see that we look at mandatory representation for people with disabilities at all ends of the guardianship process, and that the people who are representing them are trained. We have training and training standards and monitoring guidelines for guardian ad litems, for lay guardians, and for professional guardians. And these, at least I think for the professional guardians, I'm not sure of the guidelines and the training components for GALs, but I think the standards of practice for professional guardians are outstanding. And as a matter of fact, in 2006, when I became a lay guardian, I became a lay guardian back in the 80s, but when I became aware of the standards of practice for professional guardians, I thought that was a standard that I should raise my practice to in case it was ever questioned. And so my interest and familiarity with the guardianship process and activities in WINGS really came out of my awareness of those standards of practice, and I was aware of problems and issues, and I thought it was perfectly logical, reasonable that I be involved as a lay guardian in this dialogue, and I'm thrilled.
Tom, she's a hard act to follow, but what are you looking for tomorrow?
You know, when I listen to Tina speak, I think tomorrow I'm looking for something rather subtle. This is a long-term process, the changing and the shifting and the evolving of this supporting people in elders and disabled persons in their making of decisions. And I see the community orienting and learning itself, learning in its own capacity to what direction it's looking in, the kind of problems that it's facing, and beginning to prioritize some of these issues that are coming to fore. I also find myself thinking about one of the breakout sessions that I signed up for, which was to listen to somebody talk about guardianship monitoring. And there's a lot that can come out of guardianship monitoring that simply follows and on the one hand, in the most pedestrian sort of a way, following a guardianship, letting the guardian know that there's a system that's watching and supporting them, that there's a certain amount of some steps that need to be fulfilled in order for a guardian to work and be best tuned and most in the interest of the incapacitated person. On the other hand, there's certainly an awareness. The professional guardianship board has had a major disciplinary function over the years, And it turns out that there's a good share of guardianship cases and guardians who diverge from these standards that you're talking about and have been disciplined for some kind of hair-raising cases. Some people think, well, every profession, there's 1 or 2% of people who really can't be trusted with other people's money or other people's lives. And other people think in the guardianship world that there's a greater share of those kind of people than there really ought to be. Some people think that it's 5%, even 10%. There are people who think that maybe even 20% of paid guardians are not sufficiently responsible, which of course you must be very careful to look at the larger portion, the 80, 90, 99% who, as you hinted earlier, are really dedicated to doing an incredibly complex job. A job, by the way, that I couldn't begin to think of doing myself. I look at the demands on that person and they're really substantial. But what I'm interested in is seeing that there be a more formal monitoring system that also recognizes the effectiveness and learns from the really, really good guardians, but keeps an early eye out or a sharp eye out to early identify guardians who need help, maybe ought not to be doing it for other people. So I'm hoping to see more focus in that particular issue, but I'm really expecting at this stage not to see a lot of dramatic results as Washington State looks at this area, but it begins to set its direction and begin to make the right decisions. Remembering at the same time that there's, in the U.S., there's 49 other states all dealing with the same thing and dealing with the economics, the increasing numbers, the increasing social value on the self-determination that an incapacitated person ought to be able to retain.
Well, it sounds like it's going to be a great day tomorrow, and thank you for being such wonderful advocates. And we appreciate your leadership. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
You bet.
Thank